Good morning, everybody. I'm Pete Najarian. This is the Take for Market Rebellion. We talked about it being jittery. It continues to be a jittery market, and the moves, the velocity of these moves is absolutely extraordinary. And we started off Monday, the first day of the year, moved all over the place from the pre-mark all the way through into the close. Same thing on Tuesday, and we're already starting to see a similar pattern today. So there's no doubt about it. When you look at where the volatility index is, it should be a little bit higher than it had been, which was in the very low 20s, to the levels where we are now, and that big spike that we had just the other day up towards 29. So it does make sense. We are getting movement. And even if you just look at the close to close, that movement's pretty interesting, but the intraday movement is just extraordinary. So yesterday we were in the pre-markets. We were looking pretty good. We had some movement back and forth again. And like I say, maybe it's not even jittery. Maybe it's just a certain nervousness and people sort of repositioning. And we have seen both the NASDAQ and the S&P, well, I should say actually all three, the NASDAQ, the S&P, and the Dow, just kind of moving in all kinds of different directions, with the S&P sort of finding that middle ground in between the two, because there has been such a discrepancy when we've looked at some of those moves. Now, yesterday, the powerful move, and we've talked about this for a while now, and this goes back multiple months now, going back to November, but energy and materials. And I cannot emphasize that enough. We talked about that run. It was about a 30+% run from energy, and it's been extraordinary. We've seen option activity the entire way across this whole thing, and we continue to see energy trading. It's why the other day when markets weren't looking so great on Monday, when I was on the halftime report with Scott and they were asking some questions, absolutely materials, absolutely energy, that they just continue to show us reasons why we ought to be in some of these sectors. And when you look at energy, boy, when you look at those beta names and what was really happening yesterday, just the fact that the XLE or energy itself up about 5% or so, that speaks volumes. But then you look at some of the movement out of Apache and Marathon and Occidental and Halliburton and Diamondback and Devon and all these names, Pioneer, we're talking 7 to 10% moves to the upside. So that is something that you don't get to see that every day. Although in the energy space, we have seen it pretty frequently, it seems like, over the last couple of months, with some pauses here and there as well. So materials as well. Material had another great day. And if you recall the other day on the halftime report, we were talking about Summit Materials. That was one of those. Today, an absolutely explosive move after we'd seen some of that unusual option activity there. Take a look at Freeport. And if any of you are members of Market Rebellion, you can very easily search this out and take a look at some of these names like a Freeport McMoran. When did they really start accelerating the moves in terms of the unusual option activity hitting at just the frequency that we have been, and these moves to the upside that I don't know that they're done. They just continue to, they being the very large traders and positioning into upside, and even actually been buying a little bit further out, especially in a name like Freeport, where we've seen some February options trading, and we've seen a little bit further out. It's not all just this front month or front week paper that we've been talking about so much, but we've actually seen significant moves and significant size trades coming from a lot of those different names in the material space, whether that's US Steel or Freeport Mac or AA. You take your pick. I mean, Summit, which is a name that not as many people are familiar with. As a matter of fact, we're seeing some material space again today that's hitting. So it just continues. And that's been a great thing, because it gives us that much more reason to be there. And maybe even some of that rolls that we talk about. And people who are not familiar with what I'm talking about when I say rolls, because not everybody is by any stretch fully up to speed in terms of all the options in the derivatives world. But as you're looking at these, when we talk about rolls, we're talking about, most frequently, we're talking about somebody rolling up and out. So in other words, if they have a January position on, they can roll, and they can take that roll from those January calls. Maybe they move to February, maybe they move to March, and they might even move up a few strikes, taking a little bit of that risk off the table. And that's something that we talk about all the time. That's part of the discipline. And that's exactly something that I've been busy with today. I've probably had more transactions, I'm taking a look right now, in the first 45 minutes or so of the day than I have in a really long time. And that's saying a lot, because we have been really exceedingly busy when you look at some of the consistency of what we've been doing and how things have been playing out. So Finished yesterday, the Dow up about 170 points and the NASDAQ up 120 points, which nearly a 1% move on the NASDAQ yesterday. Crude hitting that $50 level. And again, basically today, kind of holding on to that as well. We talked about volatility. We were up in the 28s, the middle to upper 28s, and finished in the 25, 26 sort of a range. But the volumes just continue to be extremely strong. As a matter of fact, yesterday hitting about 32.7 million contracts. So staying over that 30 million sort of barrier. And we've just been holding above that for a really long period of time. If you look back, and we've been talking about how we've seen this move, and part of that move since November, and a lot of this move towards materials, towards energy, towards financials, part of that move has been the options that have just been flowing and moving out of certain areas and moving and positioning into other areas. By the way, I see a lot of the Q&A popping up, and yes, we'll absolutely get to that. I'm almost through with what I've got to tell you about today, but I've got a little bit more. How about the fact that gold's pushing up towards 2,000? We talk about oil up towards 50. We talk about also silver and the move that we've had there, starting to recapture not only those 27s, but actually pushing towards 28 as well. So this nice broad sort of a move. And by the way, we've been talking about starting to see a little bit more from gold and silver. We certainly are seeing some of that. As a matter of fact, the other day for Unusual, we actually had a silver name as well, Fortuna. So we continue to see a little bit more from gold, a little bit more from silver. And obviously you can see those levels that I was just talking about as well. By the way, yesterday on that volume, Apple over 1 million contracts again, a little bit less from Tesla. Neither of those two names actually trading where the volumes have been. So a little bit broader movement across where we were seeing a lot of that options paper yesterday, which probably is a good thing. It's great to see names like Apple and Tesla and trading 2 million contracts a day, but it's also maybe even better to see names like Apple and Tesla and NIO and some of these names that have been leading for a while. It's kind of nice to see them maybe pare back a little bit from where they've been trading and seeing volumes remain the same, which means we're seeing more broad movement in terms of where some of those volumes really are. So today, you got to talk a little bit about today, right? I have to hit on this. So in the morning, in the pre-markets, we were looking at the Dow, it's up about 50 points, and we were looking at the NASDAQ down about 190 points. That's a significant disconnect right there. So ahead of the bell, started to lose a little something from the Dow. And you know, is this election related? Sure, it could be. There's a lot going on in the markets. We talk about headlines all the time, but certainly that is the headline probably of the day. But so as we approach the bell, suddenly we're about flat on the Dow. Now we're down a little about 200 points on the NASDAQ. Well, we open, we're down about 30 points on the Dow. We're down about 150, 160 points on the NASDAQ. Then we start this little step to the upside. Quickly, we look over and we see the Dow up about 100 points. Suddenly, you start to see a little bit of a recovery out of the NASDAQ as well. Last I looked, before coming on here, markets were up about 300 points. Now, actually, I'm taking a quick glance. 400 points now on the Dow. And I'm looking at the NASDAQ, so it's flipped from being down 200 to actually in positive territory right now, actually up 12. I was going to say last I looked, it was down 50. We're now up 12, 13 points on the NASDAQ as well. What a flip. Look at volatility too. I just took a quick glance. Volatility now trading below 23 in the 22.5 area. So that's getting hit pretty good, about 10, 11% from where it closed. You know, we had that weakness early in the NASDAQ and a lot of the sort of the usual suspects of names when you start to see NASDAQ really start to move to the downside. You had Tesla, you had Apple, we had Microsoft, Intel, PayPal, Zoom, Snowflake, Netflix, you know, across the board. Those were some of the names that were dragging. But what was not dragging was the financials. And when you look at the financials, we've been really moving in a rapid pace to the upside. I love it because we've been bulled up on the financials for a while now. And I'll tell you what, I got to hit this real quick. Today, later on at the round table, right at the close, take a look at what Tony Dwyer, who has been all over this, and what's his phrase? Banks and tanks. He's been talking about this for a while now. Well, banks and tanks are not only working, they're exploding to the upside. And now that you've got a 10-year that's now finally recaptured that 1%, wow, the financials just off to the races today, whether it was Goldman Sachs or JP Morgan or Citi, Bank of America, US Bank, Capital One, across the board, you are seeing financials really rocket to the upside. Materials on fire as materials again up about 3%, financials up about 3.5%, industrials were up about 1.6. I'm sure these numbers are actually a little stale now because of the movement that we're seeing here, up 420 points on the Dow and then moving into positive territory on the NASDAQ. So maybe a little bit stale with some of these numbers, but I will tell you this, the financials have been there. We've been talking about some of the activity that we've seen across the board, across whether it be in the index itself, whether it's the XLF or individual names, which we have seen more and more and more of that. We've talked about a little bit in Goldman Sachs, but other names as well, where we've seen a significant amount of paper coming into the financials as well. And some of those even small, and some of those even out of the country. We had some Brazilian banks not too terribly long ago as well. So that's sort of the theme that we are seeing in banks and tanks. Boy, is that the timing of having Tony Dwyer couldn't be better. Mike Wilson, by the way, has done an excellent job as well. I have to give him a pat on the back at Morgan Stanley. He really has done an absolutely outstanding job of defining where things are going and exactly the direction that we are seeing in terms of where to rotate. And I don't know if we could call this full rotation, but certainly a little bit of a rotation, or it could even be the fact that maybe it's less about rotation, because certainly now that the NASDAQ's gotten into positive territory, maybe a little bit more of this is money on the sidelines. And we talk about those trillions of dollars that sit on the sidelines. Maybe some of that coming into the market and going into the places where people feel a little bit more secure, and you're seeing that 10-year as that's moving as well. So quick, unusual, then we're going to answer a couple questions, and we're going to rock and roll and get out of here. So Smith & Wesson. Smith & Wesson, I've been talking about the ammunition and artillery and some of these names over the last couple of months, and I really have liked this space because it really is an area where we have incredible demand and no supply, which that's not always a perfect thing, but that is a good thing to have that much demand that they cannot keep up and the supply is just not there. So Sturm Ruger is another one of those names that is absolutely exploding today. It's up about $5 today, certainly in a double-digit percentage-wise on that move to the upside. Vista Outdoor, which you've heard me talk about in the past as well. And I got to tell you, Smith & Wesson. So Smith & Wesson hit, that was the very first option that hit for the unusual today, and they hit in a big way. Stock was trading about 2036, so it was already trading up a little bit. We had a buyer of 5,600 of the January 22.5 calls. So decent size right there. Those are only going for 20 to 40 cents, so call it in the middle, about 30 cents for those options. This follows up, by the way, January 15 calls. You can imagine how well those have done. So they were buying January 15 calls back on December 10th. Stock was trading just above 15. And you can imagine just how much those have moved to the upside as stock is now above 20. So those are at least 5 and change to the upside. Give you a little idea. That's going to be a really explosive move. But we had those buyers, and now we've got more buyers. And always a good thing to see something like that. When they're right, it's great to just sort of get a little hand on the coattails and try to ride these guys when they are continuing to have some really, really great intuition about where the next level is. And obviously we are seeing in that space a lot more paper. So what else do we have as far as some of the Q&A? We've got quite a few of them. I'll try to hit a couple of them if I can. Do you like Hal into earnings on the 19th, 22.5 loading up? Hal, a little bit less than some of the other names. As you guys all know, I talk about the beta names all the time. I put Halliburton in that space, Apache and Devon and a lot of these various names. We haven't seen as much from Halliburton in the unusual. That doesn't mean that it's not a stock that can't continue to make a powerful move to the upside along with a lot of the other financials. But I am not in that name right now just because I haven't seen enough of the options paper. It doesn't mean, like I say, that it doesn't go a lot higher, because it certainly could, especially as we're watching the price of oil as it's moved. And like I say, recapturing that 50 level. I do like this space. I am not in this specific name. I'm in a lot of the other names, and many of you know it. I own shares of Exxon and Chevron, but I also own options in Exxon and some of the other names. And I really am excited about what's been going on in the energy space. So next, I'll give it. Hello, Pete. Still long Valley National Bank. Yes, I am. I'm long a lot of different financials and or banks. And obviously we always like to keep that a little bit separate because in my opinion, when you look at Goldman Sachs, Morgan Stanley, we're talking financials. When we look at some of the banks, we're talking a lot more banking out of a JP Morgan, Citi, Bank of America. And when you're looking at some of the credit card areas, obviously Visa, Master, and some of those names, American Express, I own American Express as well, stock. But there are countless names, including like a Capital One, where about 60% of their revenue or more is coming from the credit card side of things. So you just want to know where you are and why. Are you more in a financial? Are you more in a bank? Are you more in a credit card? Where are you? And I've got some positions across a lot of those. And I did bring up Brazilian banks where we had some paper as well. I own just the calls because, again, I can't emphasize this enough. When it comes to a lot of these stocks these days in emerging markets, I am not a huge fan these days just because of a lot of the headlines and a lot of what we've read and seen happen. I would far prefer to be in the options so I know exactly what my risk reward is in any of those specific types of names across the emerging markets and elsewhere. Let's see, I'll try to get a couple more. Do you expect a larger climb on metals and Bitcoin with expected increase in stimulus and government? I do. I do expect to see material space continue to move to the upside, only because of what I've been monitoring and seeing and what we've been talking about for quite a while now. I don't think it's over just yet. And as a matter of fact, for those that are looking at banks and tanks and you're looking at industrials, well, the industrials, a lot of the time you have to go over. Not only do you have the semiconductor exposure in that area, which you do more than you would think, but obviously the material space feeds into that as well. So the combination of that and so Bitcoin, sorry, that was the last thing you were asking about. This has been an extraordinary run, unbelievable. I think that, and yet if you listen to a lot of folks, whether it's JP Morgan, or Tom Lee or any of these guys, a lot of them don't think that's over. They think there's still some time or for upside. So time will tell. And we did have some interesting option paper recently. I see somebody saying, good morning, trading Riot options, tremendous volatility. Are you involved? Great timing there because I was just coming over from Bitcoin over to Riot. And absolutely, as a matter of fact, I bought some Riot calls today because we had some unusual option activity in there. And by the way, that's another area where I do like to have the options when I'm looking at some of these just crazy types of movers with incredible volatility. Yes, we are buying a little bit more, but a lot of the time, if you want to, you can spread it off, or it's relatively inexpensive in the case of, when I say inexpensive, dollar-wise inexpensive, higher implied volatilities, but dollar-wise a little bit more on the inexpensive side, just based upon where the stock is trading itself in Riot. Pete, our bank and FCX still buys at these levels. If you believe the theory that if you own it, that means you'd be buying it, then the answer would be yes, because I own both still. And Bank of America, if you would have told me Bank of America was going to make a run towards 30, I absolutely would have questioned that. But here we are, and it's made it an incredible rebound from where it had been to where it is now. And Freeport, I'm not shocked to see where it is. And we've seen this option paper they've been buying for a really long period of time. I do think both of those still do have a little bit of upside. I got time for maybe one more. May have missed it. Riot roll-ups, and are you in those? Okay, so another Riot question. Yeah, a lot of excitement, surrounded by Bitcoin, surrounded by crypto and cryptocurrency and so forth, and blockchain and all the rest of it. So that certainly is a hot topic. And obviously, when you see the price of Bitcoin and the moves that we've had there, it's like looking at others, and I'll put it right now, at least in the commodity space, other commodities themselves and the movements that we see there, whether that's gold, silver, crude, and so forth. These moves can be extraordinarily volatile at times, both up and down when I say volatile. So it is not always a straight line. That's why we lean on guys like Brian McCormick and the guys here at Market Rebellion who do an amazing job. AJ and the guys, they really do an amazing job when it comes to the charts and everything else. That's not my forte. I leave that to those guys, and I lean on them for a lot of their opinions. Folks, have a great day of trading. I look forward to seeing you tomorrow and Friday. I will be on the halftime report, so I'm looking forward to that. We'll close out the week then, and until then, just realize there's a lot of volatility going on. Last thing I'll tell you, Dow right now up about 450, NASDAQ up about 30, and we've got the VIX again, trading down more than 11% or 3 points, trading right in the lower part of the 22s right now. So wild ride today. Enjoy it and be disciplined. Have a great day of trading.